Have you ever felt completely, hopelessly stuck trying to learn something new? Well, in this explainer, we're going to uncover the real reason why that happens. And I promise you, it is not because you're bad at anything. So, picture this. You're sitting in a class, it's getting late, and you are just furiously copying down everything the teacher is writing. I mean, your hand is cramping up, but you feel like you're being productive, right? You're nodding along, thinking, yep, got it. This all makes perfect sense. But then you get home. You open up your notebook, ready to tackle the homework. You look at that first problem, and nothing. Your mind is a complete and total blank. It's almost like all that information you just wrote down evaporated into thin air. And that's when that feeling of dread starts to creep in. You start asking yourself those awful questions. Am I stupid? I just spent hours on this. Why can't I do it? That crushing feeling of frustration, that's exactly what we're going to solve today. Okay, I need you to hear this loud and clear. You are not stupid. Your brain is not broken. You are simply caught in a very, very common learning trap. If you're ready to learn how to break out of these traps and actually grow your intelligence, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Welcome to the Academy. So, what is this hidden cause? What is this trap that so many of us fall into? Well, it's a cognitive bias, and it has a name: the illusion of competence. At its core, the illusion of competence is when you mistake recognizing something for truly knowing it. You can follow along as an expert explains it, and that tricks your brain into thinking, hey, I could explain that too. But the truth is, you're just recognizing the path. You can't actually walk it on your own yet. The best way to think about it is this. In class, you're the passenger, and your teacher is the driver. As the passenger, you're just watching the scenery go by. It feels smooth, it feels easy. But the driver, they're the one who's actually navigating, making the turns, feeling the bumps in the road, and doing all the real work. And let's be honest, you can't learn how to drive from the passenger seat. Now, here's the really counterintuitive part. Sometimes taking more and more classes can actually make this problem worse. All you're doing is racking up more passenger time. You're building these giant notebooks full of copied notes that give you this false sense of security. You're completely bypassing the struggle. And here's the secret. That struggle is exactly where the real learning and memory building happen. But wait, it actually gets a little worse. Because this illusion is often supercharged by another huge problem, locking you into a nasty cycle of confusion. I want you to think of your brain like a bucket, but it's got a pretty small opening at the top. Now imagine a teacher trying to cram a whole week's worth of information into a single lecture. That's like them aiming a fire hose at your little bucket. What happens? Most of the information just splashes everywhere, making a huge mess, but not actually filling you up with knowledge. And the consequence of this is disastrous. You end up trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation of wet mud. Every time you try to stack a new, advanced idea on top of those shaky fundamentals, you're not getting stronger. You're just making the whole structure heavier and setting yourself up for a total collapse. You see, this whole passive mode of learning is so seductive because it feels easy. It feels smooth. In fact, you know what? Let me show you this illusion working inside your very own mind right now. We're going to play a quick game. The only rule is go with your first gut instinct. Don't overthink it. You ready? Okay. A bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? Go with your gut. So, did you say 10 cents? If you did, don't worry, you are in very good company. That is the answer that feels right. It's fast, it's simple, and it's the answer that most people's brains jump to almost instantly. But let's actually check the math. If the ball is 10 cents and the bat is $1 more than that, well, the bat would have to be $1.10. And if you add those together, you get $1.20, which is wrong. The easy answer, the one that felt so smooth, it just fell apart. The correct answer is actually 5 cents. If the ball is 5 cents, the bat is $1 more, so $1.05. And together, they cost $1.10. It works out perfectly. You see, that 10-cent answer, that was your brain on autopilot, in passive passenger mode. It just picked the answer that felt easy and smooth, not the one that was actually true. That is the illusion of competence in miniature. If this just blew your mind a little bit, go ahead and hit that like button. And I'm genuinely curious, let me know in the comments what your first answer was. Okay, so we've diagnosed the problem, we see it in action. How do we actually begin the transformation? Well, it doesn't start with a new study technique. It starts with a new mindset. See, after years of falling into this trap, we start telling ourselves a story. We say things like, oh, I'm just not a math person, or I'm not wired for science. That story, that identity, is so much more damaging than any bad grade could ever be. It puts a permanent ceiling on what you believe you're capable of. So the single most important change you can make is this. You have to reframe what confusion means. Stop seeing it as a stop sign, a signal of failure. Instead, I want you to start seeing it as a work in progress sign. That feeling of being confused is the feeling of your brain building new connections. Honestly, if you're not a little bit confused, you're probably not learning anything new. All right, so with that new mindset starting to click into place, we can finally talk about the path forward. How do we make the switch from being a passive passenger to an active driver of our own education? Think about it like training for a marathon. You cannot get in shape by watching videos of other people running. It just doesn't work. You have to get out there yourself and run until your legs ache and your lungs burn. Well, that mental headache you get, the one you get when you're really wrestling with a problem without looking at the answer key, that is the feeling of your brain getting stronger. That headache is growth. And that, of course, brings us to the most important question of all. What does that training actually look like? How do we start running the marathon instead of just sitting on the couch and watching it? That is exactly what we're going to break down, step by step, in part 2. I'm going to share the specific, actionable techniques you can use to go from passive watching to active problem solving. I'll even tell you the story of how I figured this out for myself when I was at my absolute lowest point. So make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on, because you are not going to want to miss the solution. All right, welcome back to Brainpower Academy. In part 1, we really pulled back the curtain on the lie of learning, that sneaky illusion of competence. Well, today, in part 2, we're done diagnosing the problem. We're going to start fixing it. We're about to unlock 2 super powerful and, yeah, I'll admit, slightly painful techniques that will force your brain to build genuine, lasting understanding. Let's get to work. So this whole journey for me, it really kicks off with one number, 42. Yep, that was my score on a calculus test when I was 16. And let me tell you, that grade didn't just hurt my GPA, it completely shattered my identity as a good student and forced me to face a really scary truth about how I was learning. I had done everything I was supposed to do. You know, I went to every class, I made mountains of flashcards, I highlighted my textbook until it was glowing, but that 42 was the proof. It showed me I hadn't really learned a single thing. I was just a parrot who had gotten really good at repeating facts without having any clue what they actually meant. I could say the words, but I didn't get the story. Look, if that feeling of just mimicking understanding, if that hits home for you at all, then you are in exactly the right place. We're about to dismantle that feeling for good and replace it with real, earned confidence. And hey, if you're serious about this stuff, about truly upgrading your mind, make sure you subscribe to Brainpower Academy so we can stay on this journey together. So I go to my teacher, right? And I'm expecting him to, I don't know, give me more tutoring sessions or something. But instead, he just lays out this harsh truth. He told me the problem wasn't that I wasn't working hard enough. The problem was that my entire approach to learning was just fundamentally broken. I was lying to myself about what it meant to learn. And then he said this, and this is the line that just completely broke my brain open. He said, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it. You've just memorized a password. And it hit me. That's exactly what I'd been doing. Just collecting passwords, formulas, dates, definitions, without ever understanding the system they were supposed to unlock. I had access, but zero comprehension. And this right here, this breaks down the 2 mindsets perfectly. Over on the left, you're just a passenger, a mimic. And that knowledge, it's fragile. It disappears the second you're under pressure. But on the right, you are the driver. You can actually rebuild concepts from scratch because your understanding is robust. It's permanent. Our goal, our entire mission is to get you from that left column over to the right. So, okay, how do we actually make that jump? Let's get into our first anti-tutoring method. Now, this is a technique that is designed to mercilessly destroy that illusion of competence and show you, without a doubt, what you really know. It's called the blank sheet protocol. Now, the secret sauce behind this protocol is a principle called active recall. See, deep learning isn't about passively shoving more information into your brain by just rereading or rewatching something. No way. It's about the effortful, sometimes painful act of pulling that information out. That struggle is what builds the strong neural pathways. It's like lifting weights for your brain. The process itself is, well, it's brutally simple, but that doesn't mean it's easy. First, you learn something. Then, and this is the key, you shut it all down. No books, no notes, no screens. You take a completely blank sheet of paper and you force your brain to recreate everything it can from memory. And that gap, the gap between what you managed to write down and what's in the source material, that's your truth gap. And that's exactly where real learning begins. I'm going to be honest with you, the first time you do this, you're probably going to panic a little bit. You might feel kind of stupid. And you know what? Good. That discomfort, that awkward silence in your head, that is the feeling of your brain being forced to build real connections instead of just leaning on its usual crutches. That is the feeling of genuine growth. Seriously, I really want to know who's brave enough to try this. Maybe even tonight. If you are ready to stop coasting and start building some real intellectual muscle, drop "I accept the challenge" in the comments right now. Okay, so once the blank sheet protocol has brutally shown you where your knowledge gaps are, our second trial gives you an incredibly powerful tool to fill them in for good. This technique is all about transforming that fragile memory into rock-solid understanding. This is the famous Feynman Technique. It's simple. You pick a concept you're struggling with and you pretend to teach it to a kid. The most important rule, you absolutely cannot use any jargon. And whenever you stumble, whenever you find yourself saying something like, well, you just do this because it's the rule, that's a giant red flag. That stumble, that's your blind spot. It's the exact point where your own understanding completely breaks down. Let's make this super concrete with a classic example. Almost all of us see this formula. And what do? We memorize it. We're taught to just plug in the numbers and get an answer. You know, A is 3, B is 4, so C must be 5. Great. But that's not understanding. That's just using a password. But someone with true understanding asks a totally different question. They're not just thinking about the numbers. They're asking, what is this formula actually saying? They don't see a random string of symbols. They see a story about physical space and how things relate to each other. And this is the beautiful aha moment. The formula is literally telling you that if you build a physical square on each of the two shorter sides of a right triangle, the combined area of those two small squares will perfectly equal the area of the big square on the longest side. When you get that, you own the concept. You can actually rebuild the formula from this visual story, even if you're stressed out during an exam. Okay, I can hear some of you already. This sounds hard. This sounds like it takes way too long. I have assignments due tomorrow. And you know what? You're right. It feels slower at first. But let's take a quick look at the alternative. Look, you're already spending the time studying. The only question is, are you just spinning on a hamster wheel, or are you building an exponential growth curve for yourself? Passive rereading feels productive, I get it, but you're building on a foundation of sand. This new way, this intentional struggle, yeah, it feels harder, but it builds a foundation of solid rock, and that makes every single advanced concept you learn after this so much easier to grasp. So at the end of the day, it all really comes down to a choice. It's a choice about what kind of learner you want to be. And it's about adopting a brand new mindset, the mindset of the driver. So let's just quickly recap the mental toolkit you've literally built for yourself just in the last few minutes. First, you can now diagnose that awful feeling of fake knowing. It's the illusion of competence. Second, you have a precision tool to find your weak spots, the blank sheet protocol. Third, you have a powerful method to rebuild that knowledge so it's permanent, the Feynman Technique. And most importantly, you have a total mindset shift from being a passive passenger to an active driver of your own learning. And that's the real takeaway here. These techniques are so much more than just study hacks. They are a declaration of ownership over your own mind. If this was valuable to you, please like this explainer and share it with a friend who's also serious about their own growth. And to keep sharpening your thinking with us, make sure you subscribe to Brainpower Academy. You know, the real work, it doesn't happen here on the screen. It happens in that quiet moment right after you close the laptop. So ask yourself, what was the single most important concept you learned here today? Close this down, grab a blank sheet of paper, and prove to yourself that you truly understand it. Begin.